Hello and welcome to another episode of the Transfer Show here on Anfield Index. I am Trev Downey. I'm joined, of course, by Dave Davis and my friend. We have been somehow blessed, it appears, by the transfer gods with the amount of stories. You think of the window after window where we've desperately tried to wring some content out of minimal stories and links. They are endless, Dave. I've never experienced anything like this. It reminds me a little bit of the summer when Kenny came in and did the massive overhaul with the amount of movement that's potentially possible. Now, it still has to happen, of course. The stories are there, buddy. The stories are there.
It reminds me of that part in the Bible where Luke the Apostle sat them all down, all 12, 13 of them, whatever it was, and Jesus was having a laugh and they were all there. And he just looked around and he just went, on a quiet note, lads, we are fucking massive, when he looked at the team. And that is just, honestly, how it feels right now. It could just be the window of all windows for us, this one.
It has that feel to it. And I mean, we need to get into it, honestly, if we're going to keep roughly to an hour, because there's so much going on. We'll start with the Robbo stuff, because I think that was the one that kind of caught most people by surprise. And the longer you're exposed to it as an idea, the more sensible it seems to seem from everybody's perspective. I think an awful lot of people, including yourself and myself, when we saw it first, were like, yeah, come on. And then, like I say, give it a little bit of time, let it roll on a bit. It seems to seem like a really, really good plan. What is the latest we know on it?
I mean, when we were chatting about this, because we got it on Friday, we sent it to each other. It was like, yeah, right, don't tell me next. Joe Gomez is headed to Barcelona as a trequartista type of thing, like nonsense story. But actually, it all unravels, doesn't it? And it also comes out that, yeah, Robbo's agency, led by a certain brother of a certain someone, are trying to get him released on a free, that Liverpool are prepared to do this. And more importantly, with a bit of digging, Robbo seems quite keen on this. In fact, from the various people you speak to, as you know, there's almost be more of a surprise now if this didn't happen, truth be told. And even in the last 10 minutes there, Paul Joyce has written an article about Atletico Madrid keen on Lucas Digne, the left back at Aston Villa, if the move for Robbo falls through. So that's on top of the previous Paul Joyce story and David Ornstein. So, yeah, it does seem that they're right in for him, that this is a realistic move. And I think we've got to gear up. And it's funny, isn't it? People are different on the Robbo ones. People adore him, Liverpool legend, which I get. People won't hear a bad word against him. There'll be others who maybe think he's declining, if that's the right phrase, and what we've seen last season. But either way, I think we've just got to gear up for Robbo likely to be at Atletico Madrid by the end of the summer. That is what a lot of people are leaning into. So then, Trev, people go, oh, well, that's fine, because we're going to bring one in. And, I mean, we're all just waiting for this, aren't we? The Milos Kerkez story. In fact, Bournemouth announced their new left-back, didn't they, this morning? So everyone's like, right, get on with it. Come on, we all know what's happening. And even in the last hours, you know, people saying they're still negotiating it. Our info is it's done. We're just waiting for the announcement, a bit like Wirtz. So then people are like, well, that's okay, because we've got Tsimikas at cover. Trev, digging around on this, genuinely, honestly, Liverpool are quite happy to move on Kostas Tsimikas this season. The info that we've got is Arne Slot does not really fancy Kostas Tsimikas. And if you think last season when, I mean, let's be honest, Robbo was really struggling, wasn't he, at times, really struggling. And Tsimikas still wasn't getting in the team. He only had a run at the end of last season, really, didn't he, when it was all finished, all said and done, and everyone was getting a game. So the likes of, honestly, Wolves and Leeds have apparently been making inquiries for Tsimikas as well. Liverpool are not putting any barriers up. There is a realistic possibility from our info this summer that Robbo and Tsimikas could depart. Milos Kerkez comes in, and there's potential there might not be another left-back addition because the club are even looking at options like if Joe Gomez stays, he can cover that left side as well. But if you think about it practically, if Milos Kerkez comes in, what left-back is going to want to follow? Because Liverpool are just going to have spent the best part of 40, 45 million on someone who's clearly going to be the first choice left back and start. So what left back is going to come in and go, yeah, I'll take that on, knowing full well they'll be number 2 and cups and stuff at best. So, and I know people have suggested Owen Beck, the youth product, but digging around on that, again, the suggestions are that there's not the belief he's ready to be a deputy yet. We'll have to see. But I mean, left back, I didn't think we'd be talking last week about it this much, but a real chance, Robbo and Tsimikas depart, and it's just Kerkez coming through the door.
You and I have both discussed the idea of the 2 lads leaving, and I think everyone was doing their own bit of Football Manager and saying, applying some sort of outside caution logic to it and saying, well, you can't get rid of the 2 lads. And yet it makes all the sense in the world, really, because again, as you said, to be fair, before the cameras went live, you said to me, I mean, Robbo was sort of playing half speed a lot this last season and still getting his place ahead of Costas, who's not fancied. I love the idea of Joe being able to cover across. The problem, of course, with Joe is, will he be able to cover across? Because will he be available? And the misfortune that we don't have a good to go kid ready to make that step is the real issue here. Because you're right, nobody's going to want to come along and play shadow to a lad who's going to be one of our biggest signings ever in defence in terms of the money. It's an interesting one. And I think people will watch that with real interest, because you'd imagine, Dave, when it comes to application of the budget, irrespective of the size of it, and we have wildly contrasting notions, depending on which stories you believe, as to what size this budget is. But you would imagine way down the pecking order would be another left back. So maybe there's a lot to be said about that Gomez idea. Or maybe, Dave, like I said to you earlier on, we might have some sort of a connection with a centre half stroke left-sided defender who could double up in that role. So we'll see how that goes as the summer wears on. Let's move on to the story that broke, of course, because nothing ever happens for us on a show day. After we had done our last show together, we got all the details of Florian Wirtz. I was on Daily Red the next day breaking it down. You were doing a kind of immediate emergency transfer short show as well. Let's talk about this. So we are pretty content, I think, with the details. Although you were saying there seems to be a little bit of discrepancy between the figures in the British media and the figures elsewhere. Did it land finally with the 100 plus 16 add-ons? That was the initial stuff we were getting from both Joyce, I think, and who else was it on the day? Romano came in eventually, but most of the information we were getting was it was 100 and then 16 in add-ons.
Yeah, which, good, no reason to doubt them. If you believe the UK side, the patch journos, like you said, Joyce, even Ornstein, it's 100 million guaranteed, isn't it? And 16 million add-ons, depending on certain things being triggered, and ultimate team elite success as it's been described at the same time. And to be fair, as a few suggested, there's always going to be different reports on the German side, because Liverpool are going to leak one figure their side, Leverkusen they're going to leak another figure their side. Of course they are. That's the way these things work. But more excited is anyone who's called Adam P, Justin Bieber's little brother, whatever his name is, get your plane tracking ready, because as it says on the screen there, Florian Wirtz is coming in at the end of the week, isn't it? I don't know why Liverpool just love doing business on a Friday. It's like Hughes and Edwards just work the opposite week a little bit to everyone else somewhat. So, yeah, it's all ramping up. We'll be plane tracking. We'll be watching it. But by the time we're talking next week, Florian Wirtz should be a Liverpool player. Mental.
That is mental in and of itself. And again, not to speak too much about how the sausage gets made, but we were just talking about this and how the vast amount of actual concrete links and even moves that have already been made that we can kind of tick off now, 3, is such a departure from previous windows. And there is more to come, which is really exciting.
Yeah.
And we would have spent the whole summer talking about Wirtz and talking about how we can manipulate the squad that we have around him to make the most of him. But now it looks like we could be talking about a lot of new colleagues around him as well. I mean, it's just a very exciting time to be doing this show. And of course, one of the major areas where it looks like we will be making more changes is in attack. And that is, of course, entirely dependent on us getting some money for the attackers that we currently have that look like they're going out the door. Let's start with Darwin Nunez, because from the Saudi interest disappearing to is that Atletico thing real anymore? Do you remember that thing we heard about before?
Yeah.
It's not only doubled down on both of those fronts, but we also now have a third front in terms of interest via Napoli. This is getting really, really interesting, because when you factor in Napoli, it brings in another lad into the conversation as well.
Yeah, it's just funny, isn't it? Like, everyone knows about the Saudi side. The stories are out there. Atletico Madrid and Napoli were kind of alluded to, but there was a case of, really, they've just won the league, who they've got. But as Ramon and a few others have sort of mentioned in the last 24 hours, and on his YouTube, he specifically said that Napoli have gone from just like a light to actually speaking to Liverpool. They firmed up that interest and looking to see what the deal is. So, yeah, there is interest in Darwin Nunez, and you hope, because let's be honest, he's leaving Liverpool. We can obviously get the best price, or, as you alluded to there, the best deal realistically, because Napoli have got a certain Nigerian forward, haven't they, who we've talked about before, who you're thinking like, come on, lads, you like Chiesa as well. Sure, there's a deal to be done for Mr. Osimhen that way, so that comes into the mix. You then talk about the Atletico links as well. And then, yes, we know, and funnily enough, you like Robbo as well, don't you, Mr. Simeone? So you like Nunez, you like Robbo. How about that young lad, Julian, who's doing well for you and had a goal disallowed the other day in that Club World Cup? And he did just say, didn't he, that we need, the difference between us is PSG is they can make big investments and buy all these players. Well, maybe if you give us a certain player, we might be able to furnish you with a fair bit of cash and other players in return as well. So your mind does just start to wonder a little bit, doesn't it? It is intriguing, but the only big thing to say about Nunez, the info we've got is, I'm not sure we like this too much. I don't know how to describe it, but all the info is he wants to stay in Europe in that regard, and that's where he's leaning towards, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. If we can use him for Atletico or for Napoli in a certain deal for those players, as we mentioned. But if we can't, the only side is if it's a straight cash deal, they ain't going to pay as much as the Saudis, are they?
Yeah, see, that's exactly it. If there's a leveraged thing to be done for Alvarez or for Osimhen, two lads that I think everyone will be happy with, to varying degrees, then yeah, that becomes a very, very interesting prospect. And like you say, when you factor in the possibility of players plus or another player in there plus, it starts to get very, very interesting. And, again, he is going. That's, I would say, as close to 100% sure as you can manage. The fact that he prefers Europe is going to close a window for us, likely, on a big old bowl of money. So we're going to have to, the boys are going to have to box very clever here and do a good deal for the club. And maybe one of those, maybe Napoli will pay big-ish for him because, they know the Osimhen isn't going to stay around or whatever it happens to be, or they don't want Osimhen to stay around. But the stories about attackers don't end there. And one person who's in our little link label tag thing there as well is Ekitike. And those stories are interesting. But I'm going to allow you to drop this clanger here because It's a big one, and it's an ongoing one, and it's one that people have completely just dismissed out of hand. Talk to us about the other attacker stories. And there is a little wrinkle in the Ekitike one that I like as well.
Yeah, the Ekitike one, interesting, because it looked like he was nailed on for Chelsea, didn't he, at one point? We were all expecting that to happen, but then it didn't before the Club World Cup, and it did seem a little bit strange, to be honest, that it didn't happen. So even Ian Doyle's mentioned it on the Blood Red podcast that, and there's two names he specifically said where this morning Liverpool are a big interest in Alexander Isak and Hugo Ekitike. That's what Ian Doyle said this morning. And Alex Crooks also followed it up in the last few hours to say Liverpool are big fans of Alexander Isak and Anthony Gordon at the same time. So you keep thinking, like, what are you talking about, etc. But honestly, doing a bit of digging on this, and it sounds far-fetched, we get it, but doing a bit of digging on this, that Ekitike, when we talked about how his agent seemed to be fueling the Liverpool interest, the info that we've got is that Ekitike is waiting for us. He's waiting for us to see what we do. That's why there's no move to Chelsea or the others right now. And even the United on big wages are sniffing around. But Ekitike is waiting for us almost to say, no, we're going elsewhere. Or, yes, you're our man. Even though he's clearly not the first choice for us, he's prepared to hang around. I mean, this is insane. We're normally in the pecking order when we do these shows. We're usually waiting for other clubs to not do business to see if we can get our top targets, aren't we? But it seems like Ekitike, who's not our top target, is waiting around. Which then comes to who is the top target? And that name's just been mentioned twice. And again, even digging today on this, Liverpool are still trying for Alexander Isak. Now, I get it. Get it all out your system, people. Newcastle got Champions League, his injury record, the price will be ridiculous and all that. We're agreeing. We understand that fully. I'm not disagreeing with any of those statements. But even today, in the last sort of few hours when we're asking and waiting on messages back and things, it's still that, no, Liverpool and Arsenal are waiting on their striker business a little bit to know whether they definitely cannot or can get Alexander Isak. And it's only when that's done that they'll move for other people as well. So I can't believe after all this time, we are still talking about Isak. There's Ekitike still in the mix who wants us, even though he's clearly not our first choice. These next few weeks, Trev, could just be insane.
It does have potential to be as mental as anything we've ever seen. Like I say, this will be on the back of the three big signings, huge signings that we've already made. The Ekitike thing, just again, for context, and I hope people are getting that, you're talking about one of the most sought after attackers in Europe. Whether I've seen people refer to him as overrated or not, I know several people in our own little collection of podcasters here wouldn't be as excited about him as they would be about others. Fearing perhaps he's still at the project stage. But the fact that we're bloody huge, aren't we? We're just massive. We've got a lad like that waiting to see if we'll like nod in his direction. This is unreal, Dave. And I need to go back to the Gordon thing as well, because that's going to throw people.
Yeah.
And again, I saw in the chat somebody mentioning, well, the only, the Gordon thing is probably a no-go because, and we don't necessarily have it down to talk about here, but we can allude to it quickly. Luis Diaz, the stories there around Diaz, we'll probably come back to it maybe in the last section. But the Barca Diaz link looks to have gone quite dead there because they look to have an interest in Williams. Do you think that's the only way that Gordon story has any legs at all? Because like you say, I mean, and again, please don't shoot the messengers. We're presenting to you the stories that keep getting put out there. Do you think it's inextricably linked with Diaz, that Gordon thing?
I do, yeah, absolutely. And I mean, we've been quite open. I've said it on a number of shows. I'm not a particular Anthony Gordon fan. I'd be lying, and contradicting myself if I said I was at all. But it is a name that does keep coming up and up and up to us again and again. And even Alex Crooks mentioning it again today on Talk Sport. So the old no smoke without fire job, isn't it? I don't want there to be. I don't want us to be particularly interested in Anthony Gordon. But that name just keeps coming up and up time and time again to us. So don't shoot the messenger. Believe me, if we get Anthony Gordon, I might be thinking about it myself.
There is more potentially. This one keeps oscillating between negative and positive, and the current state of oscillation is towards the negative end of things with Ibrahima Konate and his contract situation. Everyone will have seen, and we didn't really get into it, the whole Tyler Alexander-Arnold thing in relation to Robbo. We didn't really get into it, but it's been an interesting rabbit hole. I've seen an awful lot of people going down talking about this guy and how he's done these succession of deals that have not been in the club's favor at all. And, people were reading that he was looking to get Robbo out of the club for nothing and all this kind of stuff. Whatever about that. The other really annoying story that was going around, of course it was, because Real Madrid do this themselves anyway, was that they were one of the clubs looking to get a free agent in next year. And who would their really top-end free agent be? This time it was going to be Ibrahima Konate. PSG links are also real. And apparently the player has an interest in not one, but both. And he's a young man and he's not a Liverpudlian. And you only get one career and so on and so forth. So you can understand the lad's head being on the swivel, regardless of what we would want to do in this situation. Where do we stand in terms of what the latest is? Because as far as I can see, or as far as I've read, there's been no progress with that contract at all.
No, there's not. And it kind of came out the other night. And again, not trying to blow our own trumpet, but how many weeks have we been saying now that PSG and Real Madrid have been speaking to Ibu about it and have turned his head? As Marca put out the other night, that Real Madrid are working on this as a free transfer for next summer. Yeah, they are. Absolutely. Because a very good centre-half like Ibu, if you can get him on a free, it's good business, isn't it? If we were doing it the other way around, we'd be saying the same. The only thing, again, I think it comes down to is people, I think, maybe looking at this in different ways. I keep saying, and I understand it, selling, I understand the element, but don't think you'll get the price anywhere near you want. And the key thing to remember right now is PSG are about to buy or are close to buying Zabayani, aren't they? The Bournemouth boy. So that's going to give them another centre-half in. So if Ibu is an opportunity, as you call it, for them on the market, they're going to lowball. Of course they're going to lowball. They're going to say, well, we'll give you this now. We'll just wait 12 months and do it then and give them a massive signing-on fee like Real Madrid were, or willing to, sorry. The problem for us then is that on a free, we all know the figures that Real Madrid and PSG are going to be whispering in Ibu's ear and to his agent, aren't they? And Liverpool aren't going to get anywhere near those figures. So I honestly am not hearing anything good. Again, it's say don't shoot the messenger. I want to be hearing good stuff about this, but I get people saying, oh, you've got to sell him, and that. But if you only get 30 million, Trev, there comes a choice. Like, is it worth just thinking, do we just run it down on a free and go from there? And I know people won't like that, but that's a bit different than the situation that's just happened recently. But I really wish I could bring better news on this, but all the murmurings are that PSG and Real Madrid will offer him more, that if PSG do it this summer, it will be a low ball because of their situation and what they've got. If it's Real Madrid, obviously we know how that's going to work. I want to hear something good, but the only concern I've got with Liverpool at the moment, there's a realistic chance that we're changing 3 out of 4 of a title-winning backline by the summer.
Yeah, and as the story went on and as the season went on, I think we'd have been happy enough with two of them being changed anyway. But we all have a fondness for Ibu. On his day, he's as good as anybody in the world. But there is the real possibility that people should brace themselves for that if that story that we heard about how the club might have been willing to just see out Luis Diaz's contract at those lower wages and see that as value and accept the zero fee at the end because do the trade-off rather than giving them a bump in wages for 2 years or 3 or whatever. Maybe they'd be willing to do the same with the reported 80 grand that Ibrahima Konate is on. Who knows? But everything seems to be in play here. And we can all have the visceral reaction of, I do not want to see us going down this route of another free. I get that. That's where I am as well. But we don't know what sort of bean counting shenanigans are going on in the background. All I know is that you want to make sure that the player's psychologically right if he's going to be hanging around. You know, that has to be massive. That's a massive, massive part of it. So we'll keep a very, very close eye on that one. And by the way, again, we haven't mentioned alternatives. I know you've seen the Inacio stories, the Diamand stories. There are Mark Weahy links coming back again. Everybody's got a story, but when we have something solid, they will present it to us here on the show. Speaking of solid or not solid, a lot of people have this difficulty in their heads when it comes to Jarell Quansah, especially in whether or not he's going to be a Liverpool player going forward. Some people really high on him and thinking, look, he's a kid. He's done really well for us at times. But we're hearing this very strong Leverkusen link. And we know other British clubs are interested in him, Dave. The problem here, I think, with Quansah is going to be, the sticking point is going to be what kind of money the transfer fee would be. I get the feeling that they'd be willing to let him go. And that might then have a knock-on effect of what they could offer Quansah or them, Konate and so on and so forth. So what's the latest with the Leverkusen link and Quansah?
Yeah, I mean, that on the screen, even in the last hour, Sky Sports Germany saying, as they report a few times, that Quansah's high on their wish list and saying specifically that talks are underway with Liverpool at the same time as well. Now, as we speak, Quansah's currently with the England under-21s, isn't he? In Slovakia, I think it is, at the Euro Championship. So there's no mad rush for this. Yeah, Quansah's camp, as we kind of alluded to, he did an interview during the week where he said, I'm ready to take the next step in my career. Now, as it stands right now, there's no way he's taking a next step, quote unquote, at Liverpool, isn't he? Because he's not going to get the minutes. So there's no way he's taking that development step, playing. It's just not going to happen at Liverpool. So then you think, okay, and I know people will be big fans of Quansah, like you said. So is it a loan? Is it a transfer? But the one thing to keep in mind as we got back with this is, yes, Leverkusen are about to be furnished with £130 million in total from us. Of course we are. We know what deals are about to happen. But that doesn't mean they're big spenders. That's not the structure, the way of their club. And actually, that you mentioned the sort of difference in price there. Suggestions are Leverkusen think even 30, 35 million is already the absolute top end. You know that they're almost overpaying a little bit for Jarell Quansah. Problem being for them on Liverpool side, Liverpool, if they sell him to a Premier League club, and especially because of the homegrown element, they'll demand more, won't they? Because there's always a homegrown tax. Of course there is. So it sounds great that Leverkusen could get him, but you know Liverpool have already put that figure out at 50 million in the press. Now, they know they won't get 50 million, but it's a starting point. And it just feels there's too big a gap between 35 to 50, considering Leverkusen are already at their top end as well. That's the suggestion. So this just might prove difficult for them to do. But Jarell Quansah is absolutely looking, as he said, to take his next step. A little bit different from Harvey, as you mentioned before, who's almost done everything and wanted to stay, but it's just not worked. Quansah quite happy to step out, take that next step. So it probably is just a case of loan, permanent deal, or what happens for him.
Was there an aspect of this story as well? It was certainly there in the early days of it being floated that he wasn't necessarily giddy at the thoughts of Leverkusen and going to the Bundesliga. That was part of one of the first reports or two that I saw. Has that hung around as a kind of a concept there?
Yeah, the other bit, and we'll mention this later on as well. Thomas Tuchel's been quite open to a lot of players, hasn't he? The ones who are looking at getting a shot at the World Cup squad, because there's only so many slots that aren't taken guaranteed. That if you do want to get in the England World Cup squad, you've got to be playing regularly and you've got to be playing football of a certain level that actually, maybe certain games of a certain standard we're not going to be paying attention to, shall we say. So I think that comes into the mix as well. But Leverkusen will be in the Champions League. That's important to say. So that maybe goes in his favour. But I just can't see them bridging the gap that we're going to ask for at the end of the day.
And just before we move to the last Liverpool story, which is another acquisition for the club, it's gone very quiet. I feel like an absolute heel saying this on the back of all the striker stories and attacker stories and all the rest of it, and defender stories. But it has gone very quiet on the old defensive midfielder front, hasn't it? Because once the Wirtz thing got done, it just seems as if, right, that's no more stories about your Wharton type players. But of course, the way Liverpool are working at the moment, that could easily be just the plan to keep it quiet. But again, those stories have gone quiet. It's fair to say that, isn't it, Dave? And that, like, if there's something that's out there that you're hearing from one of the reliable people, we will certainly feed it into the chat here as we go. Yeah,
it does seem that there's almost like the priority list now seems to be, now we've got those three done, or about to get those three done, touch wood, the sales are number 9 seems to be the next on the hit list, doesn't it? That seems to get done. And then obviously it will depend how other things unfold before we revisit the midfield element. But I kind of get it in a way. Obviously, we all want a new midfielder. I think everyone's agreed. But if you look at the team immediately now, there are more question marks around the defensive elements, aren't there? And who's going, the attacking line. So it's just natural they're doing it priority order. But I would be astonished if by the end of this window, me and you ain't talking about a midfield option again.
Yeah, same as that. Our last story then to do with Liverpool on the show today is a backroom story and the hiring or imminent hiring of Giovanni van Bronckhorst, a name that will be familiar to an awful lot of people. Maybe just fill people in on his background, his status in the game, and what we know about his role, his upcoming role at the club. And I know you've got a little angle here, including Michael Edwards and Saudi and all the rest of it.
Yeah, there's been still talk around the backroom staff. And I mean, there's been Dirk Kuyt linked as Johnny Heitinger's replacement, Etienne Reinders. And then this story just came from a few days ago from nowhere, didn't it? That Giovanni van Bronckhorst, former Barcelona, former Arsenal player, former manager of Rangers, I think PSV as well. So got experience in the game, well known to Arne Slot and another of the Dutch contingent as well. So people will look at this and think, well, he was a flying left back, isn't he? So maybe he could work with Kerkez. Who knows that way as well? It'll be interesting to see a very attacking fullback back in his day. And then Michael Edwards, this was good to hear, but quite a few rubbish the reports, didn't they, around Al Hilal saying that he was set to take over there in their structure. That absolutely, he has spoke to them, but not that back, as a few said. So that's always good to know, because I think him and his acolytes have got a fair bit to do just now.
The main worry when I heard that Al Hilal story wasn't to do with Al Hilal versus Liverpool as a job. It wasn't that. It was, had the goalposts shifted a little bit, Dave, in terms of the bigger plan at Liverpool, and what really was a huge part of apparently luring him back was this idea of a second club and having that model and him being in charge of all of that. And that seems to have gone very much on the back burner. So I think that's why people were a little bit nervous that maybe he was like feeling like, well, this isn't what I signed up for. Do you see where I'm going with that? That is fair enough to make that point, isn't it?
Yeah, I actually saw, I'm trying to think it the other day, if you saying, oh, well, he's only been back 5 minutes. But if you actually check when Michael Edwards issued that statement to say he was coming back, you might be a little bit surprised as to how long he's known that. And also in that time, as you alluded to, there's been the Bordeaux near miss. Do you remember when we nearly bought them? There was the Malaga links that Ornstein put in, and it does seem to have gone all quiet on the multi-club front, which was part of his, as Michael Edwards said in his statement, the appeal of him coming back and being the global head of football for FSG. So, yeah, you never wonder, because he's not beyond games as well, if there's a little bit of like FSG, sort your act out a little bit and get things going. Who knows? But, yeah, it wasn't really a story that we like to hear, and I wasn't too sad to see it rubbished either.
Yeah, fair enough. Fair enough. We have still loads more to talk about. So let's start in the Premier League before we move to Europe. And United, it's always lovely to see spanners being thrown into the United works. And Thomas Frank's move seems to maybe have thrown one of those spanners into the Mbeumo works, as there's now a little bit of an inkling of a story that maybe he'd like to follow his ex-manager to Spurs instead of going to United. Gyökeres as well was someone that I saw Man United fans crowing about and saying, if we get him, the Premier League is finished. We're going to walk everything. You know, the nonsense they go on with. Yeah. But apparently there's another preference there from that player. And there are other bits and bobs, including Branthwaite. Walk us through United and their current situation with the deals they have done or are looking to do.
Yeah, now they've got Kuna sorted. The next one they're trying to do is Mbeumo. That came out from obviously Ornstein and all the various reports. But now Thomas Frank is the manager at Spurs. As the report came out, they are trying to sway him to there, offering obviously the option of Champions League football. But there are suggestions that, and Christ knows why, Mbeumo has his heart set on Old Trafford. He must need his head tested if that's the case. So we'll see how that one unfolds. One player, though, who doesn't seem to have their heart set on Old Trafford is Victor Gyökeres, because he was linked. But as per Fabrizio Romano the other night, his priority is Arsenal over United. But it's going to be interesting because obviously we had the president talking and rows with Gyökeres' agents, and even Gyökeres saying that I will speak when the time is right type of thing. And the only reason I'm saying it in that tone is he does have a kind of a Dolph Lundgren in Rocky IV look about him, doesn't he, a little bit, with the blowback type of thing. So, you know, if he dies type of thing. So we'll see that. Spurs have also made Matthias Tell's move permanent, the one who was on loan from Bayern Munich. So a bit of spend there, but probably a wise move. And then I don't know if I've got it up on the screen, but there, yeah, I have there. This is one to keep an eye on. Do you remember I mentioned England players specifically and Thomas Tuchel? Spurs are in right now for Jarrell Branthwaite. And part of the reason that Jarrell Branthwaite is looking for a move is, as per Thomas Tuchel, he's been left out the squad, and Thomas Tuchel's been open that players need to be playing at a certain level, a certain standard. And as the report comes there, Liverpool, United, City and Spurs have all tracked him at one point or the other. And you can understand why. He's a talented player. He wouldn't come cheap at all, but he might just be one to keep an eye on this summer. And the other reason I should mention it is I always like mentioning this name because people get different reactions from it. Indy Callier tweeted it, didn't he, about Liverpool having interest in Christian Romero. So we should always get that into the mix as well. But yeah, Jarrell Branthwaite might just be an interesting one to watch this summer.
Indy's getting more right than wrong lately. That's all I'm going to say. City are back in the business end of things as well. We talked on our last show about how they had sort of quietly gone about 4 deals, was it? And now there's another one on the horizon for them. And it looks like Kyle Walker's walking out the door as well.
Yeah, this lad, and I'm probably pronouncing his name wrong, Naipan, the young Norwegian midfielder, he looked nailed on for Villa at one point, didn't he? But City have swooped in, and 12.5 million. He's going to go back on loan that way as well. So, you know, a future deal, as it were. But they've proper jumped in and taken him from under Villa's nose. you mentioned Kyle Walker. I mean, if ever anyone doubted if Kyle Walker has a future at Manchester City or it could be turned around, there was nothing funnier than watching Kyle Walker do his podcast and saying he'd have traded any of City's titles or anything he won at City just to have won one trophy with Spurs. So, of course, that enamoured him even further to the City fans, didn't he? And various reports that Fenerbahce, the Turkish side, they are in for him. And speaking of Villa and youngsters, this is a name you might remember from a while ago, Trev. Betis's Jesus Rodriguez, the left-sided player who's very rapid, can play left wing, also left back, that Liverpool had looked upon him on many occasions. Aston Villa are in talks with him. Wouldn't surprise you if Villa and Liverpool, for certain youngsters, are looking in the same market, aren't they, in that regard? So we'll see if Villa firm that up.
Very interesting. Yeah, lots of moving pieces at the moment. The under-21s tournament you mentioned earlier on is kind of a factor, as is any tournament that's kind of currently ongoing, because you're waiting, like we were waiting for with the Wirtz thing, for the international stuff to be over. It's going to be a place that people are going to be focusing their attention for various reasons. Some of it is going to be scouting, and the other is going to be looking at players who are already sort of semi-established, like the likes of our own Harvey Elliott there, and wondering what's going to happen to them, and if they have a positive tournament, could that possibly be a little shop window for them? What's going on here with Everton and Wolves? Definitely both interested in one player who's at the tournament.
Yeah, French player, Villarreal, the Spanish club, Tierno Barry, I think it's pronounced. So he's got a 34 million release clause. So as you mentioned, Everton and Wolves both having a good look at him. Newcastle's boy, the Danish lad, I think it's called Asula, if I'm pronouncing that right. He's shining as well. So it'll be interesting to see. There's loan offers in for him at the same time. We'll see what develops there. And a name that until the other day, I have never watched this player ever. I couldn't tell you a single thing about him, Trev. But there's a young player, and probably you'll be Googling him like me later, people, Clement Bischoff. No idea, as I say it, but Bromby, apparently left-sided. Liverpool scouts are watching him at this tournament as well.
They're the kind of things I like hearing, because I wouldn't know about it otherwise. So I will be having a little explore around that particular footballer and see what he's up to. And we'll finish with Chelsea. And yeah, there's an interesting angle here, isn't there, with the João Pedro interest, that we could, if we were getting all excited, make a little sort of reference back to Liverpool with. So finish with the Chelsea Newcastle story.
Yeah, Chelsea had looked at João Pedro. We've been linked, but the one that's come out today from quite a number of Newcastle sources is they're set to open formal talks with Brighton over João Pedro with a fee around 60 million quid mooted. Now, yeah, you might start to think, well, it could just be cover for Callum Wilson because he's leaving. But Newcastle are trying to renew him on a deal as well. So that, there's that in the mix. And there's a certain striker we talked about around 10 minutes ago that, you could draw aspersions from, but we'll have to see what develops there. Chelsea as an alternative, and I mentioned this striker before. I don't really know him that well, but that 6'9" young German lad, Wolfgang or whatever he's called at Stuttgart, having sort of not had success with what looks like Pedro, not having success with Ekitike, Chelsea are having a good look at him. He's the latest one in their sort of eyes. And a name that Liverpool fans will also know and has broken in the last hour as well. Do you remember they didn't get Bino Gittins, or they were maybe coming back to it, that Dortmund lad? Malik Fofana, the young Belgian Lyon left winger who Liverpool have had a good look at, and his agent was desperate for Liverpool to get involved and said that's the best place for him. Chelsea are apparently looking at Malik Fofana as their left-sided option as well. So, I mean, the transfer window opened today, and the Premier League sides are on it big time.
No surprise to see Chelsea copying our homework. I think you'll agree. Only Real Madrid do that more. So that's no surprise. I think the João Pedro stuff is going to have people making fanciful connections in their brain, because I'm one of those people who's just made a fanciful connection in his brain. Maybe they're going to get rid of their current striker, and then that would mean so. Anyway, we'll see. But interesting. And I did see some video footage of that Volta Mada guy. And he's a very unique, almost Crouch-esque build. But if anything, and Crouchy was quite graceful for a big lad. This guy is really interesting the way he moves on the pitch. I knocked some real crack out of looking at the clips of him. He looks like a really effective footballer. So wouldn't be surprised to see him in the Premier League, let's put it that way. In terms then of Europe, you call this first item Dad's Army movement in midfield, because we have a few veterans on the go. And before we go, let's acknowledge the fact that the ultimate Dad's Army veteran is, of course, ex-Red James Milner, who has found himself with a contract extension at Brighton, which I love that for him. I have to say, I'm a massive Milner fan as a bloke. I just think he's a good lad. So the longer he's knocking around, the happier I'll be. I love seeing Milner coming onto the pitch and kicking a few lads up in the air and then doing a good pass. It's a great combo. But there are other veterans on the move. We've got De Bruyne, and we all know about that one. Xhaka is on the move as well, possibly. What else do we know in terms of older footballers or veteran footballers and their movement?
Trev, in an alternative to our normal standard viewing, and this is going to sound bizarre, but work with us here, people. Trev, have you got your phone with you right now?
I just turned it off because it was ringing.
I have just sent Trev a screenshot of something. What's going to happen in approximately a minute, or however long an Apple or Android phone, whatever Trev's got, takes to turn on, is Trev's going to load it and he's going to read the message and he's probably going to utter the phrase, "What the fuck?" So we'll give him a minute to do that. But before we get to our what the fuck moment, people, Dad's Army, Luka Modric is undergoing a medical, but he's going to play the Club World Cup. So he's going to AC Milan. So that's the first installment in Serie A of Dad's Army. Kevin De Bruyne has confirmed his deal at Napoli. So that is the second installment of Dad's Army in Serie A. AC Milan are also looking at Granit Xhaka on a nominal fee. So another Dad's Army moving there into Serie A. Now, a little bit different. Paul Pogba. Christ, you forget he was still playing football, don't you? He is in talks to go to Monaco. So I don't know if someone's just, I think the kids call it a Football Manager 2021 regen type of thing, I believe is the name. But Dad's Army, older midfielders. Yeah, there you go. And now I've given you that information. Trev, have you read the message I have just sent you?
In the immortal words of the Virgin Mary, come again? So I think you need to drop this one because it's directly related to the story we were just talking about and the club we were just talking about, and it could have knock-on effects here. So let the people know. This
is, as Trev will verify, a top-level source who gets exceptional info, knows two ways about it. Remember, and again, 2 and 2 getting 27, but as will emerge in the near future, Newcastle have a serious interest in Diogo Jota, the Liverpool forward. Now, you could probably guess, what we could draw, what we could envisage, what we could want for that. But just in case you missed that, and Trev will verify, because I just sent him the screenshot from a very an exceptional source, I think it's fair to say. Newcastle are interested in Diogo Jota. We could all probably draw some dots as to what we think that could mean.
So, just to reiterate, to connect the dots for people who weren't here for the early part of the show, Newcastle João Pedro links are quite strong. Liverpool Isak links, for some reason that we couldn't fathom, are strongish. The story won't go away. And now we have Diogo Jota links to Newcastle. You put Jota and Pedro coming into the club, I think that might leave us with a possible freeing up of the ultimate Liverpool target. That's wild, Dave. It's wild.
Also, by the way, and we say this, we don't blow our own trumpet, but how many do we get right, which people never mention? Now, if this comes up, let's just see. Let's just see. But yeah, this window, Trev, just has the ability to be absolutely insane, doesn't it? Absolutely insane.
I love a bit of drama, and that's a wild story. That's a really interesting story. Makes you wonder what kind of fee we could possibly demand for this guy. Let's finish off. We've got 3 stories left. We'll start with Barca. And I mentioned it earlier on, the Nico Williams thing and the knock-on that might have for us in terms of a certain wide attacker that we have that's got his eyes in the door because his contract isn't sorted. Talk us through the Nico Williams thing. And there's also some stuff you got there about Fati as well. And you mentioned Zabarni as well earlier on. So just wrap those ones up for us.
Yeah, the few sort of moves in Europe are interesting. Now, we spoke to the Barcelona journalist about this, and he almost said it's just like it's last summer rehashed. It's like Groundhog Day when, again, Barcelona were looking at a left winger, and again, we're looking at Nico Williams and Luis Diaz. Now, the big thing to say on this, which is maybe ultimately crucial for us at the same time, is Nico Williams has given priority to Barcelona over everyone else. There's not great relations between Athletic Bilbao and Barcelona, but the player wants this move that he didn't really seem to last summer. And it's funny that the likes of Yamal and Fermin have been like on their Instagram tweeting photos or putting out photos with Nico Williams and liking posts like the Kerkez family related to this move as well. As it says there on the screen, it's about as ever, if Barca get the green, can they do the finance? Can they do it? How are they going to make the wages? Of course, those things come into the mix. Of course they do, people. Absolutely. However, really important to say, so putting their Barca will try and paying coupons there, that it does thwart Luis Diaz's ultimate summer plans, doesn't it? We know full well, as we said many a time, the ultimate dream for the Diaz family was to get to Barcelona. We know that Liverpool were not going to offer him, made it clear there will be no contract renewal coming. So the knock-on impact is, if Luis Diaz wants a wage increase, there's only one place he's ultimately going to have to go unless something new comes onto the table. So just keep that in mind. You mentioned Fati as well there. Part of the way they'll look to raise these funds, they're trying to sell Ansu Fati to Monaco, aren't they, for a fee? So that will go towards this at the same time. And just to mention, because the final Liverpool link, we talked about Konate earlier, PSG are trying to do that deal with Zabarni as well. It's just crazy around the globe, isn't it?
Yeah, and again, not to overstate it, but we would often struggle for stories, not just Liverpool stories, but stories in general. And that's leaving a full week between the shows. So it's fairly fantastic that we have this much to talk about. I think the Luis Diaz thing, you and I were talking about before we even started recording. I think he's got that simple choice now, doesn't he? It's like play the level of football you want to play at Liverpool and be a valuable squad member, maybe a first teamer. Who knows what Arne Slot will do with him next year. Or, go and get your gold-plated telephone and, go into semi-retirement and what is just not going to be a league equivalent. Right, 2 stories left then to wrap us up. Some random European stuff first. We mentioned the Sané to Galatasaray story last show, and it's a wild one. Mainly because we had brought Sané up several times, and it looked as if Bayern were trying to do everything they could to keep him around, which I think we were even kind of surprised by, but it did seem to be that was the direction of travel, and then there's this pivot. We've got some details. I think you've got some details about the money he's going to be on at Galatasaray. And now we've got also some stuff here about Kerkez too. I'm not sure if we've mentioned the full details of this aspect of it before. And in a minute, then we'll finish with the last references to Saudi and what might be happening given the window's open again.
Yeah, we'll do that. And then we'll even loop back to the Liverpool stuff just to reiterate how crazy it's been tonight. But for this one, Sané, do you remember what the Turkish call them the Bashkans, the president, as I told you last week, Trev? The Bashkans have come up with the big dollars, and Leroy Sané around 40 million euros, 140 million euros a year at Galatasaray. They want to go big this summer and to tempt Victor Osimhen, who we will mention again. Kerkez, yeah, I mean, he's raging, isn't he, about this whole Sporting thing and what he thinks he should be sold for and what a quote-unquote gentleman's agreement is. As he said, I will talk when the time is right. Probably Sporting see that as the time when someone puts the money down on the table they're looking for, and maybe not before, we'll have to see. And then, as we mentioned, PSG Zabiani. And the only thing just to say on that is there are still links, and we'll finish with these very shortly. Marquinhos and Saudi links are still there as well. So that could be a potential one in, one out there. And you mentioned Saudi. I might as well throw it into the mix. I mean, I didn't think we mentioned Saudi and Ange, Trev, in all honesty, but an Ornstein bomb there. Al Ali have made contact with him about potentially becoming their manager. So that's crazy. Do you remember Juan Duran, that player for Aston Villa, the Colombian who went, big money in January instead of Nunez? There's various reports that Turkish clubs and others are being invited to make loan offers for him, that he's not happy there. It's all going a bit wrong. And don't want to be too harsh on the lad, but there's been questions about his mentality, haven't there? Behavior, maturity, that type of thing. So you do wonder around that. But that would open up a spot for Al Nassr, wouldn't it? And by the way, Al Nassr, if you're looking for a few players, we've got some attractive South Americans on sale in case you were looking as well. So just keep that in the mix. And then the final one, I kind of respect Al Hilal on this in a way, just because there's taking no for an answer, then there's brute force stubbornness. So when Victor Osimhen turned you down 5 times, what do? You get ready to make a 6th offer to Victor Osimhen, as came out today, Trev, that they are prepared to pay him around 1 million euros a week to make this move. A 6th offer. Now, he's got options, as we said, and across Europe, but 6 offers, £1 million a week. I just wonder what they'll go to before they finally take no. But yeah, Saudis, obviously they missed their Club World Cup window, but yeah, they are not done by any means.
I had a little bet with myself as to who would be first to make a Duran joke, and it is in fact Damo in the chat. Fair play to you, Damo. We have had quite a lot of information crammed into our just coming up on 59 minutes. There's probably somewhere you want to go just at the end to underline the what we've talked about, maybe something new, maybe a different twist on it, or maybe just to reiterate the fact that news did come through about Jota from a solid source, and it definitely does get things moving. Whether it's the kind of fantasy move we were thinking about, or whether it's just freeing up funds for Liverpool to go for this striker or attacker, it's all, I think, quite positive stuff.
Yeah, we said quite early on in the show that all the info we're getting, despite what everyone says and what we were thinking as well, it seems like madness. Liverpool's top target is still Alexander Isak of Newcastle for the striker role, who We get it. It seemed fanciful, as we said, with the Champions League, where they are now and everything like that. However, it was being reported by various places still, as we mentioned. Ian Doyle mentioned the interest today for the Echo. Alex Crook mentioned it from TalkSport, so that was there as well. And then whilst we were on the show, as I kind of interrupted our normal viewing and sent the screenshot to Trev, just for obviously verification, if you want to call it that, the latest that we have, our own bomber, if you want to call it that, for this show. We'll see if this bears fruit. Newcastle are interested in Diogo Jota. I bet you can guess how we all would want to see these deals, plural, panning out, shall we say. So we'll wait to see what develops. But yeah, Diogo Jota, liked by Newcastle, Liverpool's top striking target. You know who his name is. We're all manifested now.
Just do the sums, you know, or make the Darwin and Robbo for Alvarez thing work. I'm okay with either. So we'll leave it at that. Lots of delicious possibilities on the table, let's put it that way. We thank all of you guys for getting involved in the comments, all our live viewers, up to, that's a good amount for an early evening show. So we appreciate you and your eyes and your ears. And yeah, fair play, Jay. I saw your comment there about Billy Bones. No chance, mate. No chance. We will wrap it up at that. Thanks to Dave for all the info presented as brilliantly as always. And you know we're going to be back with you very, very soon.